The plumber's face went pale. I thought he'd found a leak, but what he found wasn't water. It was something that had been buried for years. That was the moment I knew I had to uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Hi, I'm Nora Bennett. Before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Because what I'm about to share still feels like it happened yesterday. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat still echoing in my chest. It all began on a quiet Saturday morning, the kind of morning that smells like fresh coffee and new beginnings. I decided to renovate the old bathroom in the house my late husband, Tom, and I had bought 15 years ago. The house was built in the 1940s, solid bones, but time had given it a tired kind of charm. After Tom passed 3 years ago, I couldn't bring myself to change much. His toothbrush still sat in the cabinet for almost a year. His flannel shirt still hung in the closet, smelling faintly of cedar and engine oil. But lately, something inside me had started to shift. I wanted to breathe again, to fix things, to move forward. So, I hired a plumber. His name was Walter Harris. An older man, maybe in his 60s, with hands that looked like they'd fixed everything from tractors to teapots. His voice had that gravelly warmth of someone who'd seen too much but still cared enough to smile. He reminded me of my father, steady, kind, trustworthy. We started early. My kids, Eli and Grace, were playing outside with the neighbor's dog while I stood with Walter in the upstairs bathroom. He was inspecting the cracked tiles and shaking his head. "Old pipes," he muttered. "You can hear them crying when the wind hits just right." I laughed lightly. "They've been crying for a while then." He smiled back. "We'll make it right." When he turned on the water, the pipes groaned like they were waking from a long sleep. I remember thinking how alive the house suddenly felt, like it was stretching after years of silence. But Walter kept frowning, muttering something under his breath. "Pressure's dropping," he said. "Might be something clogged in the main line. I'll have to check the basement." Now, I've always hated that basement. Even when Tom was alive, I rarely went down there. It had this damp, heavy smell, like the air was thicker than it should be. Tom used to call it the belly of the beast. He was joking, of course, but it never stopped me from feeling uneasy whenever I had to fetch something from the freezer down there. Walter went down with his flashlight and toolkit while I started cleaning up the bathroom debris. I remember humming an old song Tom used to like, "Harvest Moon" by Neil Young, when I heard a sound, not from upstairs, but from below. A dull thud, followed by silence. I called out, "Walter, you okay?" No answer. Another minute passed, and then I heard the creak of the basement stairs. His boots hit each step slowly, deliberately. When his face came into view, I froze. His skin had gone gray, like the color had drained straight out of him. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped his wrench. "Mrs. Bennett," he rasped, eyes darting toward the basement door. "You need to grab your kids and leave right now." I blinked, half laughing in disbelief. "I'm sorry, what? Did something burst?" "Don't pack anything," he said sharply, voice cracking. "Just take them and go." The air between us turned electric. "Walter, you're scaring me," I whispered. He swallowed hard, eyes wide and wet. "I shouldn't have opened it," he muttered. "I shouldn't have touched that wall." "Opened what?" He looked past me toward the bathroom floor, then back to the basement door. His lips trembled like he was fighting with the words inside him. Finally, he said, "Whatever's down there, it's not supposed to be found." And then, without another word, he grabbed his things and rushed out the front door. I stood frozen, my heart thudding against my ribs. I could hear the kids laughing outside, the distant bark of the dog, the wind through the maple trees, all of it suddenly too normal, too fragile. When I finally gathered enough courage to walk to the basement door, I noticed something strange. The air near it felt colder, like the temperature dropped a few degrees in that one spot. A faint smell drifted up, earthy, metallic, unfamiliar. I reached for the light switch, but before I touched it, I heard it. A clink. Soft, hollow, like metal tapping metal from deep below. I stood there for what felt like hours, my hand trembling near the doorknob, my breath shallow. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, grab my children, and do exactly what Walter had said. But I didn't. I opened that door, and the moment I did, the house seemed to exhale, a long, low sigh that sounded almost human. I stepped back, my stomach twisting, my pulse pounding in my ears. Something was waiting down there. And though I didn't know it yet, that single step toward the basement would unravel everything I thought I knew about my husband, about my home, and about the life I'd been living in the shadow of a secret. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house sounded sharper, every gust of wind like someone whispering through the vents. I'd tucked Eli and Grace into my bed, pretending it was for fun, our family sleepover, but really I just couldn't stand the thought of them sleeping alone. They fell asleep fast, the kind of deep, unbothered sleep only children are blessed with. I lay awake between them, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow, steady circles, wondering what in God's name Walter had seen down there. By morning, I'd convinced myself I'd overreacted. I told myself Walter was old, maybe forgetful, maybe had a health scare. Maybe he'd smelled mold and panicked. It could happen to anyone. I clung to any explanation that didn't make me sound like a frightened woman jumping at ghosts. But when I went downstairs to make breakfast, my hand hesitated over the basement door again. The memory of that clink echoed in my ears. I forced myself to ignore it, to be logical. The kids needed normal. I needed normal. At around 9, I stepped outside to get the mail, trying to shake off the strange weight in my chest. That's when I saw Walter's old truck at the end of the street, parked half in the ditch. I jogged over, calling out, "Walter!" He turned, startled. His face was still pale, but there was something else in his eyes now. Guilt. "Mrs. Bennett," he said quietly, "you're still here." "Of course I am. What was that last night? You scared me half to death." He rubbed a trembling hand over his mouth. "I shouldn't have said anything. You shouldn't live in that house." My voice hardened. "You can't just say something like that and walk away." He looked at me, really looked at me then. "Some things in this world, they don't stay buried, ma'am. Sometimes they want to be found." I stared, speechless. He climbed into his truck, slammed the door, and drove off, tires spitting gravel. I watched him disappear down the road, my heart thudding. That's when I noticed, on his passenger seat, a folded piece of paper with my address written across it in his shaky handwriting. He planned to come back, but he never did. That night, the noises started again. It began with the pipes, a deep groan that traveled through the walls, then soft tapping, rhythmic like knuckles brushing against metal. I tried turning on the TV, cooking, anything to drown it out, but the noise grew louder after sunset. Eli noticed first. "Mom," he said, frowning, "why's the floor buzzing?" I froze. Grace was sitting cross-legged beside him, coloring. She looked up, confused. "It's coming from the bathroom," Eli said. I didn't want to check, but I couldn't ignore it either. When I stepped inside, everything looked normal, until I noticed the vent near the sink. There was a small glint behind it. I crouched down, flashlight trembling in my hand, and there it was. A tiny circular lens, dusty but unmistakable. A camera. Someone had been watching. For a second I couldn't breathe. My reflection in the bathroom mirror didn't even look human, just a ghost of myself, wide-eyed, disbelieving. I unscrewed the vent cover with shaking fingers and pulled the device out. It was old, wired, not wireless, but the realization hit me like a punch. Someone had installed it years ago. Who? My mind scrambled through the possibilities. Previous owners, neighbors, pranksters. But deep down, I already knew whose hands had touched these walls last. Tom's. I felt the air leave my lungs. He'd remodeled this bathroom himself just before he died. He'd said he wanted to surprise me with a better space. I'd thought it was sweet back then, one of the few projects he actually finished. Now, standing there holding that camera, I wasn't sure what that project had really been. I pressed my ear to the vent opening, and for a heartbeat, I swore I heard something below, a faint metallic scrape. I backed away slowly, staring at the floor. Was there someone down there? No, that was impossible. The basement was sealed. There were no windows, no crawl space big enough for a person. And yet, I heard it again. Clink, clink. This time it was slower, more deliberate. I wanted to scream for help, but who would believe me? A grieving widow hearing noises in her basement? I turned off the bathroom light and locked the door. Then I gathered my kids and sat them in the living room, pretending we were camping indoors. I told stories. We roasted marshmallows over the gas stove. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. All the while, that sound kept echoing in my mind. When the kids finally fell asleep, I sat alone in the dark, the old house groaning around me. I thought about Walter's words, "You shouldn't have opened that wall." And that's when I realized something chilling. Walter hadn't been working in the basement that day. He'd been working on the wall next to it. Whatever he found wasn't inside the pipes. It was inside the wall itself. I stood, grabbed the flashlight, and walked to the basement door again. My hand was on the knob when I heard a voice, not from behind me, but from beneath me. A whisper. Faint. Almost human. "Please, don't..." I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The basement door shuddered as if something had brushed against it from the other side. And in that instant, I knew two things. First, that Walter had been right. And second, whatever was down there hadn't been alone for a long time. I didn't open that basement door again for 2 days. Every time I walked past it, my stomach clenched, and the smell of damp earth seemed to cling to the air. The house felt different now, alive in the wrong way. Even the sound of the refrigerator hummed like a warning. On the third morning, I woke to find something new. A fine line of dust had appeared beneath the door, fresh pale gray, like someone had disturbed the concrete below. That was it. I couldn't keep pretending this was nothing. After dropping the kids off at school, I came home, locked the front door, and went to the basement armed with a flashlight, a crowbar, and a courage that didn't feel real. The steps creaked beneath my feet, each one groaning louder than I remembered. The smell hit me halfway down, metallic, almost sweet, like rust and something else I couldn't name. The light flickered when I turned it on. The space was smaller than I recalled, ceiling low, pipes running overhead like veins. I ran the flashlight along the far wall, the one Walter had been working near. A faint rectangle stood out against the cement, edges smoother than the rest. A false wall. I approached slowly, pressing my hand against it. Hollow. My heart began to race. I wedged the crowbar between the seams and pulled. The sound echoed through the basement, dry plaster cracking, the hiss of dust falling, and then suddenly, a section gave way. Behind it was a narrow cavity about 3 feet deep. Inside sat an old wooden box, sealed shut with a strip of tarnished metal. My hands trembled as I pried it open. Inside were bundles of photographs, VHS tapes, and a ring, a small, delicate thing. Silver with a missing stone. I lifted one photograph, blowing the dust away. It was of a woman I didn't recognize. Young, dark hair, freckles, she was smiling, standing in this very bathroom. My chest tightened. She was wearing my old robe. No, not mine. The same kind. I flipped through the rest. Dozens of photos, some blurred, some with dates scrawled on the back. Most of them featured the same woman, always in this house. Sometimes she looked happy. Other times she looked afraid. I picked up one of the VHS tapes. No label. Against every instinct, I went upstairs, plugged the old player into the living room TV, and pressed play. The static hissed first, then a flicker of light. The bathroom again, the same robe, the same mirror. The camera was set up on a tripod angled toward the bathtub. The woman was sitting inside it, knees drawn up, speaking softly through tears. "Please," she whispered, "I'll do anything." And then another voice, one I knew too well. Tom. My heart stopped. He wasn't visible, but his tone was unmistakable. Calm, coaxing, patient, the way he used to talk when he wanted to control the conversation. He said her name, Anna. My skin went cold. "Anna," he said, "you promised you'd stay quiet. You know what happens if you don't." She flinched at his words. Her hands trembled as she wiped her eyes. The camera shifted slightly, catching a reflection in the mirror. Tom's shadow. I froze. I hit pause and just sat there, numb, staring at the still image, the outline of his arm, the shape of his body. Everything I'd loved and trusted, now a silhouette in someone else's nightmare. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and ragged. He had filmed her. He had known her. And he had hidden it all right here, beneath my feet. I ejected the tape, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Inside the box, beneath the photos, was a folded note in Tom's handwriting. "If you're reading this, I couldn't bury it again. Forgive me. I never meant for her to die." My fingers went numb. The room spun. He'd written those words. The same man who kissed me goodnight, who read bedtime stories to Eli, who painted Grace's nursery yellow because it was a color that feels like laughter. How? How had I not seen it? I stumbled into the kitchen, gripping the counter for balance. The sunlight through the window looked wrong now, too bright, too cruel. I wanted to scream, to throw the box into the fire, to make it all disappear. But I couldn't, because if Tom had done something to this woman, then her story, her life, was still hidden in my home. And if she had family somewhere, waiting for answers, then I owed them the truth. As I reached for the phone to call the police, a flicker of movement outside caught my eye. Through the kitchen window, a man stood by the fence, watching. He wasn't a neighbor. He didn't belong here. Tall, gaunt, mid-40s, with dark eyes that seemed to know exactly what I'd just found. I stepped closer to the glass. He raised a hand, not to wave, but in a strange, almost reverent gesture. Then he called out softly, his voice barely audible through the window. "Are you Nora Bennett?" I nodded before I could think. He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "I'm Anna's brother." The phone slipped from my hand. For a moment, I couldn't move. The world seemed to blur around the man standing in my yard. His clothes were wrinkled, his expression hollow, like someone who hadn't slept in days, maybe years. He took a careful step forward, holding his hands up as if approaching a frightened animal. "Please," he said quietly, "I just want to talk." My instinct screamed to lock the door, call the police, do something. But something in his voice, fragile, heavy with grief, made me pause. I opened the door halfway. "You said your name is?" "Mark," he replied. "Mark Danner. Anna was my sister." The name hit like a hammer. Anna, the woman from the tapes, the woman my husband had filmed. I gripped the edge of the door. You knew her?" He nodded. His eyes darted to the ground, then back to me. "She disappeared 12 years ago. I spent half my life trying to find out what happened to her. The police said she ran away, but she didn't. She was scared of someone. I found her diary. She wrote about a man who promised to help her but kept her locked in a house. This house." The air left my lungs. "No," I whispered. "That can't be right. We bought this place 14 years ago." His jaw clenched. "Then your husband knew her." Something inside me shattered. I stepped back, shaking my head. "You should go." But he didn't move. His voice softened. "Mrs. Bennett. Nora, please. I'm not here to accuse you. I'm here because I got a message." I frowned. "From who?" He hesitated, pulling something from his jacket pocket. A letter, creased, worn, yellowed at the edges. "I got this in the mail 3 weeks ago," he said. "No return address, just a note inside." He handed it to me through the doorway. I unfolded it with trembling hands. The writing was unmistakable. Tom's. "If you're still looking for her, you'll find what you need in the basement. I'm sorry for everything." My throat closed. I backed away, clutching the letter. Where did you get this? It came with an old photo of Anna. Same bathroom as the one in those tapes. He gestured toward the box on the counter. I've been watching this house for days, trying to find the courage to knock. When I saw you open the window just now, I thought, maybe you already found it. I stared at him, my heart pounding. You've been watching us? He flinched. I didn't mean to scare you. I needed to know if it was safe. Every instinct told me to throw him out, but behind his exhaustion, there was something I recognized. Grief. The kind that seeps into your bones and never leaves. Come inside, I said finally. He stepped over the threshold slowly, his eyes scanning the living room, the photographs on the mantel, Tom holding Eli as a baby, Grace blowing out candles, our wedding picture. He stopped in front of it, jaw tight. He looks ordinary, Mark muttered. He was, I said automatically, then caught myself. My voice cracked. Or I thought he was. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured him a cup of coffee, though neither of us touched it. He looked at me steadily. Do you believe he hurt her? I stared at the box between us, the photos, the tapes, the ring. Yes, I whispered. Mark's eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. Then she didn't die for nothing. The words chilled me. What do you mean? He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small flash drive. The tapes might not be the only ones. Anna wrote that he recorded everything. She said he promised it was for safety, but she stopped believing him near the end. She mentioned a second room, a place he said was off limits. My pulse quickened. There's no second room in the basement. He gave a faint, humorless smile. You sure about that? I wasn't. Something about the basement had always felt off. The far wall was shorter than the blueprints Tom had shown me when we bought the place. I remembered him saying, old houses have strange designs. I'd believed him. Mark leaned forward. I think she's still down there, Nora. I think he buried her where no one would ever find her. The silence that followed was unbearable. My mind flashed through every memory of Tom, his laughter, his quiet charm, his warmth. Could that same man have stood in that basement, shovel in hand? Could he have kissed me goodnight afterward, acting like nothing happened? I wanted to scream, to hit something, to erase every trace of him from this house. But all I said was, then we find her. Mark blinked, startled. You sure? I met his eyes. She deserves to go home, and I deserve to know who I was married to. We moved quietly, methodically. Mark brought his own flashlight. I led him to the basement door, pausing only once, to glance at the photo of Tom on the wall. His smile suddenly looked cruel, like a stranger wearing my husband's face. The basement smelled even stronger now. Damp concrete, iron, and something deeper, sour at the edges. Mark walked the perimeter, tapping the walls. When he reached the back corner, the sound changed, dull, hollow. He pressed his palm to the concrete. Here, he whispered. I knelt beside him, heart hammering. Together we scraped away at the surface with a chisel and hammer. The cement was thinner than it should have been, patched over, not original. When the first chunk fell away, a gust of cold air rushed out, carrying that same metallic scent I'd smelled before. Behind it lay a black void. A small, square chamber. Mark shone the flashlight inside. For a second, I thought it was empty, just dust and shadows. Then the beam caught something pale. A bone. He dropped the light. I covered my mouth to stifle a scream. Mark whispered, voice breaking. She's here. I couldn't move. My knees gave out and I sank to the floor, trembling. In that instant, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It was a grave, built on lies, sealed with silence. And for the first time since Tom's death, I wished he were still alive, so I could look him in the eyes and ask him why. The police came before sunrise. They sealed off the house with yellow tape, their radios whispering static while boots crunched over the gravel driveway. The hum of generators filled the air, blending with the low sobs that kept breaking out of me no matter how hard I tried to hold them back. Eli and Grace had slept at my friend Dana's that night. I hadn't told them anything except that there'd been an accident at home. How do you tell your children that the man they called Daddy built his legacy over someone's grave? Mark stood beside me, arms crossed tightly over his chest, eyes fixed on the basement door. He hadn't said a word since the officers arrived. A detective named Callahan led the team, mid-50s with silver hair and a voice that carried quiet authority. He moved through the house with a careful, deliberate calm, asking questions I barely heard. How long have you lived here? When did your husband pass away? Has anything about the property ever felt off? Off. The word echoed in my head until it made no sense anymore. At one point, I caught a glimpse of the excavation through the open basement door. The smell hit me first, wet earth and decay, then the glint of something pale being lifted into a black body bag. I turned away and gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles went white. Mark's voice came softly behind me. That's her. I didn't have to ask how he knew. The look on his face said it all. Hours later, Callahan approached with a grave expression. Mrs. Bennett, he said quietly, we're going to need to take you and your children somewhere safe for the night. The remains match the missing person file from 12 years ago. Anna Danner. I nodded numbly. He hesitated before continuing. We also found a few personal items down there. Jewelry, clothing, and a second box. We haven't opened it yet. My stomach twisted. Second box? Yes, he said gently. And based on its contents, we may be looking at another victim. The room tilted. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. Another one. My husband hadn't just made a mistake. He'd made a pattern. I excused myself, stumbled into the backyard and leaned against the old oak tree. The morning light looked harsh, almost cruel, washing everything in sterile brightness. I stared up at the windows of my home, the place where I'd raised my children, cooked dinners, celebrated birthdays. Now it looked like a stranger's house. Callahan came out after a while, his voice low. We'll need you to make a statement, Mrs. Bennett. There are some details we need to confirm about your husband's time here. My husband is dead, I said flatly. Yes, he replied, but his secrets aren't. He left me with that thought, and it stuck like glass under my skin. Later, as the sun set and the officers began packing up their equipment, Walter, the plumber, appeared at the edge of the driveway. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. When he saw me, he removed his cap and held it against his chest. I'm sorry, he said softly. I wanted to scream at him. Sorry? He'd known something and he'd left us there. But when I saw his trembling hands, I realized he hadn't been part of this. He'd been another victim of Tom's silence. You knew something, I said, voice shaking. Didn't you? He nodded. Not everything. Your husband asked me years back to help seal part of that basement. Told me it was an old storm shelter. Said it was for safety. I didn't ask questions. His eyes filled with tears. But the smell, the way he rushed me, I should have. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell anyone? He looked at me helplessly. Because he told me if I did, no one would believe me. Said I'd lose my license. Said he'd ruin me. My chest ached. It was exactly what Tom would have said. Always calm, always controlled, always holding people by their fear. Walter took a deep breath. When he died, I thought it was over. But when you called me to fix those pipes and I saw the wall again, I just knew I couldn't do it a second time. I stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, he made all of us part of his secret. He nodded slowly, and I'll carry that shame until I die. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in the living room. The house was silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock Tom had loved. I could still smell the damp earth coming from below, faint but constant, like the house was exhaling its guilt. I looked at our wedding photo on the mantel. I didn't cry this time. I just stared at it until my vision blurred. Everything I'd ever believed about him, every kind word, every gentle gesture, now lived under suspicion. I thought of Eli and Grace, sleeping soundly at Dana's. How would I ever tell them the truth? How do you explain that their father was both protector and predator, husband and monster? The clock struck midnight. I whispered to the empty room, "Why, Tom?" And somewhere deep beneath my feet, the house groaned, old wood shifting, settling. For a fleeting moment, I almost imagined it was him answering. For days, I didn't step foot inside that house. The police had finished their work, sealing off the basement and removing what they called evidence. Reporters camped outside the gate, their voices buzzing through the static of cameras and microphones. They wanted a statement. The grieving widow, the woman who lived above the secret. I stayed with Dana and my kids. She made tea, kept the news off, tried to fill the silence with ordinary kindness. But every sound, the kettle, the hum of the fridge, the whisper of wind through the window reminded me of what lay buried beneath the surface of my life. Eli avoided me. Grace cried at night, whispering for her father, her voice trembling with confusion. And I had no words. On the fourth day, Detective Callahan returned. He asked if I was ready to talk. I wasn't, but I knew I had to. We sat in the sterile office of the precinct, the hum of the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos of the basement, of the remains, of items they'd found in the second box. My breath hitched when I saw them. Jewelry, a set of keys, a child's bracelet. Callahan's voice was calm. "We believe your husband may have been involved in the disappearance of 2 women, possibly more. One of them was someone he knew before he met you." My pulse thudded in my ears. "You're saying my husband was a murderer?" Callahan met my eyes, his expression full of something like pity. "I'm saying he hid things from you that no one could have imagined." I leaned back in the chair, feeling the cold metal against my spine. "He was a surgeon," I whispered. "He saved lives." "Sometimes," Callahan said quietly, "that's how monsters hide best, behind the trust they earn." His words lodged deep. After the interview, I walked to the river near the old bridge, the one Tom and I used to cross on our morning runs. The water was calm, but beneath the surface, I could see the current swirling, relentless, hidden. That was Tom. That was our life. I thought about selling the house, disappearing somewhere new, but when I imagined leaving, something inside me rebelled. That house, my home, had been built on lies, but I had lived there too. My laughter, my children's footsteps, the birthdays and the quiet evenings, they were real. We were real. If I left, all that would remain was his darkness. No. That was the moment I realized I had to take back control. The next morning, I told Dana I was going back. She begged me not to. "Nora, you don't owe that place anything," she said, her voice cracking. "I know," I replied, "but it owes me." When I arrived, the house felt hollow. The furniture was covered in dust sheets, the smell of disinfectant lingering in the air. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, the pictures, the memories. Then I stood before the basement door. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My fingers hovered over the doorknob. Then I opened it. The steps creaked under my feet as I descended. The air was damp, cold. The hole in the floor was covered now, sealed, cleaned but still marked, a scar that the earth itself couldn't forget. I sat down on the last step and let the silence settle around me. I spoke softly, not sure who I was talking to. "You don't get to define me, Tom. Not anymore. Whatever you did down here, I'll make sure it never gets buried again." The words trembled as they left my lips, but they felt powerful, like a promise. I contacted a local journalist I trusted, Mara Stone, a woman who'd once interviewed Tom about his medical work. She'd always struck me as fair, direct. When she came to the house, she didn't bring a camera crew, just a notebook and a quiet respect. "I'm not here for a scandal," she said gently. "I want the truth from you." And so I told her everything. About the day Walter found the box. About the smell. About the way Tom's calmness had always been both a comfort and a cage. About the years I ignored my intuition, the strange noises, the missing objects, the times he came home late with mud on his shoes. She listened in silence, her pen still. When I finished, she asked, "Why tell this story now?" "Because he doesn't get to be the last voice in this house," I said. "I do." She nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure it's heard right." What? It took months to piece everything together: police reports, witness statements, old property records. Each revelation tore another layer off the man I'd once loved. But with every truth uncovered, the weight on my chest grew lighter. The night before the article was published, I sat in the living room again, a candle flickering on the table. The house felt still, not haunted, but resting. For the first time in months, I breathed deeply and didn't taste fear. When the story went live the next morning, I didn't hide. I stood by my window, watching the reporters swarm outside. I opened the curtains wide. Let them see me, not as the widow of a monster, but as the woman who chose to speak. It's been almost a year since the basement was sealed for good. The house looks different now, brighter, softer somehow. I painted the kitchen a pale yellow, tore out the heavy drapes Tom loved, and filled the windows with light. Grace planted wildflowers in the backyard. Eli built a birdhouse and hung it near the oak tree. And every morning I wake up to birdsong instead of silence. The story Mara published spread farther than I could have imagined. People wrote letters, emails, even sent drawings from strangers who'd read about our story and felt something shift inside them: fear, empathy, sometimes gratitude. Some said it gave them courage to face their own secrets. It wasn't fame, it was freedom. The police eventually confirmed there were 2 victims, Anna Danner and a woman named Sophie Tran, a traveling nurse Tom had worked with years ago. Both families reached out to me. When I first saw Anna's sister, Lydia, she didn't speak for a long time. She just took my hand. We stood in silence, 2 women bound by the same ghost. "You didn't know," she finally said. "I should have," I whispered. She shook her head. "He fooled us all." Those words were both mercy and a wound. After that day, something inside me shifted. I stopped asking why. There was no why that could undo what had been done, but there was how I would live, how I would raise my children, how I would make sure their father's legacy ended with me. So I started small. We came back to the house together. Eli was hesitant at first, hovering near the doorway, scanning every shadow. Grace clung to my arm. "This is still our home," I told them. "It's where our memories live, the good ones. No one can take that from us." Grace looked up at me, eyes wide. "Is Daddy still here?" I knelt beside her. "Only in the pictures, sweetheart, but not in the scary way. In the parts of him that loved you, those stay with us." That night, we slept in the living room, all 3 of us bundled under blankets, a single candle burning on the table. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel like it was holding its breath. It felt alive. The days became weeks. The weeks became months. I started teaching art again, something I'd stopped after Tom's death. There was something healing about colors, about watching blank canvases come to life under trembling hands. My students reminded me that beauty could grow out of the broken places. Walter visits sometimes. He brings flowers for the kids and never stays long, always leaving with quiet eyes. I think he still carries his guilt, but I remind him gently. We survived what we didn't understand. He nods. and I see a small peace settle on him. Detective Callahan came by once more, months after the case closed. He handed me a simple wooden box. Inside were items recovered from the basement things Tom had taken from the women: a necklace, a silver hairpin, a small key. "I thought you might want to return them," he said. I did, one by one. Each return felt like a chapter closing, a breath released. Afterward, I kept one thing, a tiny rusted key that didn't match anything. Maybe it opened something long gone. Maybe it never did, but I held on to it, not as a token of what was lost, but as a reminder. Even locked doors can be opened if you choose to turn the handle. Sometimes at night, when the wind shifts and the floors creak, I think of Tom, not as the man I married, but as the truth I survived. I no longer hate him. Hate is too heavy to carry. Instead, I remember, and remembering is enough. A few weeks ago, I hosted a community gathering in the backyard. Families, neighbors, children, laughter filled the air. There was music, and for the first time in years, I saw my son smile without shadows behind his eyes. As the sun set, painting the sky in gold and amber, Grace tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Mom, it feels like the house is happy again." I looked around the flowers, the soft hum of voices, the light streaming through the kitchen window, and I smiled. "It is, sweetheart. It finally is." Later, after everyone had gone home, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The night was quiet, the stars sharp against the dark. I thought about how far we'd come from terror to truth, from grief to grace. The past still lived beneath my feet, but it no longer owned me. And as the first firefly flickered across the yard, I felt it, that gentle pulse of light in the dark, small but defiant. That betrayal had once broken me, but it also woke me up. It taught me that even the deepest shadows can't swallow someone who chooses to stand in the light. I took a deep breath and whispered, not to the night, not to Tom, but to myself. I finally understand what I had to do.